Let me now move to our next witness is Mr. Elder. Mr. Elder is a conservative attorney, author, and host of the nationally syndicated radio program, The Larry Elder Show. He also writes a nationally syndicated column and produces videos for his YouTube channel in association with the Epoch Times. Mr. Elder received his JD from the University of Michigan and his BA from Brown University. Mr. Elder, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Congresswoman Lee, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. I am the executive producer of a documentary that came out June 19 last year called Uncle Tom, An Oral History of the Black Conservative. And as Congresswoman Lee pointed out, Black people are a race of overcomers. And it talks about the fact that despite all the problems that have been brought up in this committee about racism, about slavery, about Jim Crow, Black people have overcome to the point now where only 20% of Black people are below the federally defined level of poverty. Still too high, but in 1940, that number was 87%. And 20 years later, that number had been reduced to 47%, a 40-point drop in 20 years. That is the greatest 20-year period of economic expansion for the history of Black Americans. And notably, they came before the Brown versus Board of Education decision. They came before the Civil Rights Bills of 1964, 1965. Despite all of this racism, all of this prejudice, Black people still overcame. I also find it ironic we're having this hearing 13 years after we elected and then re-elected the first Black president of the United States. I'm old school. I still get the newspapers thrown to my house. And the day that Obama got elected, I got the New York Times and the LA Times thrown to my home. And on the front pages of both those newspapers, there were colored pictures of Black parents hugging their kids, crying, saying things like, now I can say for the first time truly that if you work hard, you can be anything you want to be. In 1997, Time Magazine and CNN did a broad survey of Black teens and white teens and asked both of them whether or not racism was a major problem in America. And both of them said yes, not too surprisingly. But then Black teens were asked the following question: is racism a big problem, a small problem, or no problem in your own daily life? 89% of Black teens in 1997 said racism was a small problem or no problem in my own daily life. In fact, twice as many Black teens as white teens said failure to take advantage of available opportunities is a bigger problem than racism. End of quote. And that again was 23 years ago before Obama got elected, let alone reelected. Speaking of Obama, 2007, he ran for presidency. His rival for the Democratic side was Hillary Clinton. And on the Republican side, the two rivals, primary rivals, were John McCain and Mitt Romney. Gallup asked whether or not Americans would not vote for a Black person, referring to Obama, would not vote for a woman, referring to Hillary Clinton, would not vote for a Mormon, referring to Mitt Romney, would not vote for a person as old as John McCain would be, 72 years old. And what Gallup found is 5% of Americans said they would not under any circumstances vote for a Black person. 11% said they would not under any circumstances vote for a female. 24% said they would not vote for a Mormon. 42% said they would not vote for a person who would be 72 years old when he became president, which would have been the case had John McCain been elected. In other words, Obama as a Black person had a smaller barrier than these three white politicians. So having this conversation right now when racism has never been a less significant problem in America, to me, is mind-boggling. Right now, Congress is 12% Black, which is roughly the percentage of Blacks in America. In 1964, Martin Luther King gave an interview to the BBC. And he said he was surprised at the changes that have taken place in America in recent years. And he believed that a Black person could become president in 40 years' time, or maybe even less. That's roughly around the time when Obama became president. And Martin Luther King did not say, we will know when we've arrived at the promised land, when there's a Black coach of Notre Dame, which has happened, when there is a Black female who's the president of an Ivy League university, which has happened, when Blacks are mayors of all the major cities in America, which has happened, when Blacks are police chiefs of the major cities in America, when there are superintendents of schools of America or mayors of America, sometimes all three at the same time. He did not say that. He did not say when Black people become millionaires and billionaires, which has happened. He did not say when Black people become CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. He said when a Black person becomes president, that's when we'll know we've reached a point where people are being evaluated based on the content of their character to the extent that it is reasonable to expect. And the idea that slavery built America is belied by the fact that at one time, Virginia was the most populous and wealthiest state in the Union. But within a couple of generations, it had fallen behind states in the North because the South depended upon slavery, which impoverished the South relative to the North, which is primarily why the North won the election. No one could have had, or very few people could have had a life harder than my father. My father was 13 years old, born in 1915. He was kicked out of his house by his mother. Athens, Georgia, Jim Crow, at the beginning of the Great Depression. The man walked down the street, did whatever he could. Ultimately, he became a Pullman porter on the trains, which was the largest private employer of blacks in those days. Traveled all over the world, became a Marine, was one of the first black Marines, a Montford Port Marine. And my dad always told my brothers and me the following: hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. You cannot control the outcome, but you are 100% in control of the effort. And before you complain about what other people did to you, go to the nearest mirror and say to yourself, what could I have done to change the outcome? And my dad always told us this: no matter how hard you work, no matter how good you are, sooner or later, bad things will happen to you. How you respond to those bad things will tell your mother and me if we raised a man. And my father always said this about the Democrat Party: they want to give you something for nothing. And when you're trying to get something for nothing, you almost always end up getting nothing for something. Thank you very much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Attorney Elder, thank you so very much for your presentation today. Mr. Howard,